Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ian, for those kind words. I noticed that he politely didn't mention that there's absolutely no references to public speaking on my CV. So when Mark Reynolds asked me to speak today as he was unavailable, I made three assumptions. Firstly, that they'd tell me what to say. Secondly, that they'd write the speech. And thirdly, that I'd have some knowledge to be able to add to the debate. To cut a long story short, they didn't, and I didn't. So to recap, I was asked to provide a roadmap for the skills for our digital transformation and how this might attract the next generation to our industry. I gathered all my notes and ideas. It didn't take long because I was really starting with a blank sheet of paper. After much deliberation, I have arrived, though, at the following conclusion. Any roadmap that we need to draw will start with our culture, and developing our culture to focus on this transition will require really strong leadership. There's no avoiding this. We are approaching a fourth industrial revolution, and most of us, particularly those in the supply chain, have not yet developed our thinking. That's no surprise, because as an industry, we've always been slow to adapt. We tend to be conservative and pragmatic. So I'm afraid if you're all sitting there, pens in hand, thinking that you're going to scribble down the solution to finding a successful digital future, I don't think you need to be making any notes. As asking a guy from a subcontractor what his digital strategy is a little bit like asking Trump how he would hold a masterclass in diplomacy. But what I can offer is to share the thinking that we're doing about the subject. Thinking that I have to admit has accelerated considerably since I agreed to stand up here. And my key message, that the single caveat to everything that follows, is that it isn't initially about technology at all, it's about our culture. So let me explain. As a sector, we have yet to undergo digital transformation. We are simply not ready. These are all the latest research findings. Well, without a clear idea of the future and where our businesses fit, it would be pointless to start developing digital training courses. And I don't think that we should try to learn about all the emerging technology, because we would never keep up. By the time we think we know what's going on, our knowledge will already be out of date. What we do need to develop is a culture that enables our sector to successfully transition, a culture that's open to new ideas and one that's willing to learn. Often, our industry is described as being full of dinosaurs and Luddites. I think Doheny put me down as one of the dinosaurs. But we are behind the times. Google spends 15% of its revenue on R&D and technology. The automotive sector spends around 4%. And as for construction, you've probably heard this before, we are only at around 1%, and that is not enough. But it isn't surprising, because as I've said, our industry is very reactive. We wait for the phone to ring, and whatever our best intentions about strategy or new ideas, when it does, we drop everything and we get to work. often in a situation where the design is already done and gives us no opportunity to innovate. We also work in an environment where the majority view is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But there is a myth that things can't really improve. Of course they can, but culturally we are closed to that idea. I guess that's why some 60% of all construction firms don't have a director or senior manager in their businesses responsible for technology. Who on your board has the credentials to take the responsibility for digital transformation? Or for those of us that aren't quite sure, me included, we are not alone. Many of us are simply not at the party, either because we resist change or because we can't see the point. And that's a cultural issue. The late management consultant and educationalist Peter Drucker famously observed that culture eats strategy for breakfast. His point was that the hardest thing to change in any company is its culture. We have to get that right first. And when it comes to making it happen, I think we have to look at ourselves as the leaders of the businesses to make that change. We all know that there is a case for more collaborative business models. It's been clear in government reports from Latham to Egan. But knowing we need to isn't the same as getting there. So my first question is, what is the business case for change? Because if that's clear, I think it becomes a no-brainer for us to make the necessary culture shift. And of course, that culture needs to embrace any sort of change. This is an organisational imperative. It will require us to organise a change story to inspire our people, to encourage a more open, flexible mindset. Then we will be able to adapt and to adopt new ways of working. We need to take a step back. We need to look at this bigger picture and plan for the longer term. We will then be in a better position to harness Industry 4.0 and transform to a different business model. In the UK, our sector has been set a series of challenges to construct buildings 33% cheaper, 50% faster, and with a 50% reduction in the trade gap between exports and imports, and 50% lower carbon emissions. An industry-backed sector deal aims to bring together construction, manufacturing, energy, and the digital sectors to revolutionise how we deliver buildings. Digital should deliver better and more certain outcomes, and manufacturing will improve productivity, quality, and safety. This is the bigger picture, and it's an unprecedented opportunity for the construction industry to ensure it remains world-class. But if you're not convinced by all of this, and I guess it's not an easy story to listen to, perhaps the promise of increased margins will persuade you. Government research suggests that a 25% increase in productivity could almost double the average profit margin of all construction companies. The world is changing, and there is a global threat. Examples of this being the French president has committed to turn France into a global AI hub, and China has laid out plans to become a world leader in artificial intelligence by 2030. Around us is a technology arms race. This is the sort of technology which will impact on our sector. In my view, our industry is beginning to move. The fact that we're here talking about it this morning probably puts us in the top 20% of construction companies. Trimble, a consultancy, came into our offices recently. They gave a fascinating presentation about unlocking the potential of digital. This sits very comfortably with the UK's aspirations for Digital Built Britain agenda. I believe now that there is a real difference, and it is not just talk. In the UK, government funding of up to £170 million, it's called the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, has been set up to support the R&D required. This will help to provide the analysis to support change, and there are already some excellent projects underway, on-site factories and of course 3D printing. Our challenge as an industry is to become more efficient, more productive and profitable, and digital provides an opportunity to do that. So where do we start? Initially, there appears to be three obvious things to do. We could sit down and write a long and complex digital strategy. We could go out and invest in all the technology that's available and try to put it to work. You could recruit tech people and let them loose in your businesses. In my view, you can't start with any of those things. We can't start with strategy before you actually know where you want to go. You have to have a destination for your business. Steve Jobs didn't start by building computers. He started with a vision that involved thinking differently. He said that people don't know what they want. You have to give it to them, and then they don't know how they ever lived without it. Apple's strategy followed that thinking. Beautiful, user-friendly hardware followed that. And it was all based on a simple vision. We need to apply that sort of thinking. Henry Ford put it really neatly when he said, if I asked the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So let's use our imagination, and this will open us up to new ways of delivering value for our clients. Our second option would have been to go into buying all the technology available, but it wouldn't be wise to start throwing money at sensors and drones and 3D printers and expecting that it will all work. Some of it might, but again, I believe you need to have the vision and the know-how to make the full use of that technology. We all have mobile phones in our pockets. These are very high-powered machines. I'm told that effectively we use about 5% of the capacity of these phones, and this is a piece of equipment that we all think we know really well. We need to refocus our attention away from gadgets and toys. Before you invest in hardware, you have to have that vision. Doing it this way makes business sense. You understand the return on the investment, and in this way, we can generate the value that technology can bring. Our third option was about employing tech people, just letting them get on with it. A word of caution here from one of my clients, Mace. The reality is that all the new technology in the world isn't going to help us if the people in the sector aren't equipped with the skills to leverage it. We need to remember that. My take on this is that we need to focus on our people. We need to prepare them with the soft skills that will enable them to find the solutions for us. We need our people to become curious and creative problem solvers. Digital transformation will require us to think differently, and it will merge our existing skills with new digital skills. Mark Reynolds, who got me here, he also said something recently that we will require a training program like none we have ever seen before to actually capture this moment. So, the clock's ticking. We need to imagine the construction process, not next year, but in 20 or 30 years' time, and then decide whether we can get there as we are now. When we realise that we can't today, I think that's when we, as the CEOs of our businesses, have to write our first brief to our boards about what our digital vision is. And leadership, the where and how we want to improve, has to come from us. So, back to the roadmap. And this is really a note to myself. In 7 stages, we need to imagine our future, our vision. We need to analyse the opportunities for improvement and where tech might fit into that plan. We need to draw lessons from other sectors. We need to develop our people so that they can help to evolve our businesses. We need to recruit people to bridge knowledge gaps. There will be those too. And then we need to do it. And last but not least, we need to share this up and down the supply chain, because this is a collective effort if it's going to work. Referring to point 3 about learning from other industries, we are continually advised to look at the automotive sector for inspiration. Let's take a look for a moment at their digital manufacturing vision. it actually took the automotive sector some 40 odd years to achieve the position they are today. So I think as an industry we have to expect that we're not going to change overnight. But can we imagine a world where buildings can be built in the same way as cars? To get there, the expectation is that we will need to take a few quantum leaps in our thinking. And here we are, back to our discussion about culture. We also need to take a real look at the image of our industry. At a recent youth summit, it was clear to the young people that we spoke to that they didn't see us as an attractive place to work. We are viewed as old-fashioned, and in a sense, I kind of had to accept some of those views. When you think about it, some of our site operations that are going on today are still bordering on the medieval. But digital offers an opportunity to transform our image, to modernize a digitally enabled sector that offers new technical careers. These will appeal very much more to Generation Z, who I hope you're all aware of. These are the so-called digital natives who apparently spend most of their time online and live a digital lifestyle. If we can attract them, they will propel us further forward. Now, there is also a concern that as we transition into digital, we will require fewer trades. The intention of this agenda is not to replace people with technology, but we have to remember that through each industrial revolution, craft skills have always declined, jobs will always change, and there will be other opportunities, more interesting opportunities, available for that Generation Z. The other aspect to consider is that we are also facing skill shortages. So it does make sense to see an increased automation as an opportunity for our businesses. We would also see off-site manufacturing and modular construction in a similar way. A few of our competitors are already doing things differently, and we have to be concerned that if we don't, we will get left behind. It will be a collective effort from every stakeholder, from the client to the subcontractor, and everyone in between. And I appreciate that the way forward can't be set in stone. There isn't a neat formula that we can apply. It's up to us to ask enough questions to get us there. Einstein, who I think has already been quoted today, he said that play was the highest form of research. So perhaps we need to give way to our inner child and discover through experimentation. And when we know what we need the technology to do, let's harness it then, because then we'll be able to build better, safer, and more sustainable buildings in a better, safer, and more modern method of construction way. I'd like to leave you with just two thoughts. Doing this piece of work has caused me to believe that really we need to refer to our culture first, and then we need to look at our people to harness the technology to help to get us there as businesses. Let's get those things right first. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I think we can add public speaking to your skill sets as a result of that. I just want to pick you up on one point, because I think it's something that will be of interest to an awful lot of people in the audience. You mentioned the UK's sector deal. Can you just take us through what the key elements and the key components are of that, and the sort of learnings we can get from it within an Irish context?
Okay, so I think if we go back first of all to the fact that the UK government have introduced a new industrial strategy, they are really looking to try to move the construction industry on, to transition it into something, in a better place. So initially that strategy kind of gave rise to an opportunity for funding. So on the council, our chairman and some of the colleagues decided that we would make an application to get some of those funds. I think somewhere in the region of 12 companies applied, and in the end 4 sectors only, of which construction were one, were successful. So now that we have the sector deal in place, what we want to do is look at the issues around the industry, to look at innovation, to look at skills, to look at the business model, and to look at sustainability and see what we can do as an industry to actually move those things forward. So this funding of 170 million effectively will be available for match funding with companies that want to get involved and find those ways of transitioning their businesses.
Now, you also sit on the Construction Leadership Council in Britain. I suppose one of the issues that we've been discussing here in previous years is this idea of upskilling and skills. Perhaps you might just take us through the work that you've been doing on upskilling workers.
Okay. So within the work streams of the Construction Leadership Council, skills is obviously a key matter. We have a subcommittee that sits just below the Construction Leadership Council, which is chaired by Mark Reynolds, which focuses wholly on skills. There we're looking at effectively things like training, things like apprenticeship, things like future skills, and we're engaging with our industry training board, who have recently been given a new lease of life. They're being reformed, run by a new chief executive now, and we're looking at how we can address the issues that basically give rise to creating more skills for our industry.
Dominic, I just want to come to you. Your term as president of the CIF is almost over. What have been the learnings? What have you found surprising? And I suppose one question, one piece of advice you offer to your successor? Now tell the truth.
Pat's sitting down there, and I think he needs to probably put a couple of weeks in his diary so we can have that engagement. I have found it a huge honour, very exciting, and albeit it's well written about the construction economy is on the rise, but it's not without its challenges. I made reference there to the piece in the back of the merchant's lorry. The recession is over. It's over in some areas, and even in Dublin, when we talk to our members, it's not without its challenges. And the biggest challenge is viability. In my eyes, is viability and margins. And those that are busy are not jumping up and down in relation to the margins they're achieving. When we look across the water at our UK counterparts, we see in some areas healthier profits, albeit not in all areas. And when we look across then at mainland Europe, we see kind of many multiples of our profit line here. So profit, seemingly only in construction, seems to be a very dirty word in Ireland. It doesn't appear to be a dirty word in any other sector. And that's a culture, as Brian was saying, it's a culture that we have to try and change. But I do see that being the biggest challenge facing us, yes.
Okay, now we've time. I want to put it out to the audience. If anyone has a question for either Brian or Dominic, do I see any hands up, or are we still at that shy phase in the morning before we all get to know each other a bit better? No, we're all quiet. Well, luckily I have a question. One of the areas that I think you both talked about is this idea of digital transformation. And there's an awful lot of worry when people talk about AI or automation that we're just going to lose large sums of people from the workforce. Brian, you said that's not going to happen, but what sort of jobs do you see people go into? What sort of skills are they going to be upskilling into? Where do you see that future employment coming from?
I think, as we transform, we're going to need a different skill set with all the technology that's available to us. An example is in the bidding process where we all look to win work. You know, in the last couple of years, we've really changed our approach in terms of how we present the technology, the methodology, the kind of logistics of how buildings are going to be built. In that 2-year period, we've employed a young guy who really came out of the gaming industry, but his knowledge in how to use the software to adapt presentations to show 3D images and more of buildings. I mean, that kind of, I would never have thought 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'd be employing someone with that skill set. But I think now I can see the value that they can add. So I think there will just be different opportunities for them.
Dominic, do you want to come in briefly on that?
Yeah, quite recently CIF held a digital conference right in this room, and it was interesting to hear, you know, the Swedish speakers talk about the digital transformation, where it was going, especially around BIM, etc., and the huge investment that would be necessary for contractors to get involved in. However, one of our own members, who's a CEO of a very eminent M&E firm here, said, look, we need to calm down a bit here, you know, not run away with ourselves. Our companies would actually just overspend and they won't be getting the returns. We need to kind of have a very structured look at where this transformation is going, and spend within our budgets and get the returns that we need to get in a controlled fashion. If we go too far ahead of ourselves, you'll see casualties.
Okay. Well, Dominic and Brian, I just want to thank you for your time and for your input and for all your messages here today. So can we just have a big round of applause for our two initial speakers? Thank you.